Welcome to Sunlit Brushstrokes. Let's get ready to celebrate Christmas with some fun and festive watercolor pencil art. Learn to paint candy canes, a snowman, and a cozy red mug with marshmallows. These are perfect for beginners and a great way to spend a creative afternoon. Let's go ahead and get started. I've painted these on some small pieces of watercolor paper. Something inexpensive like Castel XL is perfect for this. You could cut these whatever size you want. You could even do them smaller and use them as gift tags, or you can do them a little bit larger and adhere them to the front of a card. For my watercolor pencils, I have a variety of brands here, but I'll just let you see the colors I'm working with. I have a very bright red, one that's a little bit cooler, and sometimes I call that my Christmas red, but it is more of a cherry red. I have a purple, and I use that in my shadows as well as this deep dark indigo blue. I love the indigo for mixing into my shadow colors, and you're going to see me using that a lot today. Then I have a bright Christmassy green, a nice dark green. I also have some burnt sienna, India red, dark brown, and black. I'm going to use a splash of orange for the snowman's carrot nose. And in some situations, you're going to see me blending some of my browns, such as my India red, with my indigo blue, or even my dark brown and my indigo blue, to create some colorful shadow colors. You can use this swatch kind of as a guide for yourself, or do the colors that you like best. So for our candy canes, I'm going to draw them in first with a pencil to kind of make sure I'm happy with my placement. I kind of want the two tops of the canes to kind of be about here, and then somehow I want them to cross about here, I think. I'm very, very light as I'm sketching this. I'll go darker in a minute. You'll be able to see more what I'm doing. Okay, so these are kind of the outsides of the canes. And then I'm going to come in here, just straighten things up a little bit, because yes, we don't want warped candy canes. They're more or less straight usually. And do the same thing over here. I think that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and just use this eraser. This is actually kind of like a pen shape eraser, which is perfect when you want to kind of get into small places to erase. So I'm going to use that for erasing the center of my candy cane. Then I'll just use my kneadable eraser to lighten everything, because we don't want it to be too bold. I'm going to do the bow here. So I'm going to start with the bow kind of having like almost like a little bit of a rounded, a square that's got rounded edges. How's that? And then I'll just come and do this shape here. This part of the bow, and then we'll empty, like create that empty kind of look, right? Because it's curled over. And then we'll just do the ribbon. Ribbon sometimes is narrower at the top because it's been tied in a knot, and then comes down. So you can see kind of how I would do a bow. And maybe I'll darken these just a smidgen. It's just, you know how it goes. If you add water to pencil, it becomes permanent. So I'm kind of hesitant on how dark I want these, but I do want you to see what I'm doing. So get those on there, and then I'm going to do the stripes. I'm wondering if I wait and do the stripes after I've added the shadow. I'm thinking I might even make these canes come down just, I don't know, the cane part curve just a little bit more. Something seems off to me. I think that looks a little bit more like a candy cane now. Okay, so our first layer is going to be a very, very light wash, and I'm going to actually use some brown and some indigo blue to create this color. So this is going to sound weird, but what I'm going to do is create a bit of a shadow on the left side of these candy canes. So I'm like using a very, very slight, almost soft whisper with my pencil. I'm hardly putting any pressure on, but I'm putting like a very slight, kind of light brown. This is a dark brown, but I'm just using such little pressure that I'm creating a bit of a shadow, and then there's going to be some shadow on the underside of this side of the cane. So it kind of tapers off as it comes to the top, and then it picks up as it comes down there. Then I'm going to do the same thing to this cane. This could actually have a touch mark shadow under here because it's all, you know, it's kind of behind that bow. And then here, and again, more to the left, taper off as I come up, and then bring it over on this side. So in some ways it's kind of reversed, right? Because the sun is, or the light source isn't the same. The sun is over here, or the whatever the light source is. So this is going to be light here, and it's going to be light along here. So that's why the shadows are a little bit reversed on each candy cane, because of course they're reversed angles, if you will, or flipped from each other. So then I'm going to barely put any of this indigo blue. This is a super dark blue, but I don't know. I just found that the indigo blue and that particular brown make a reasonably good shadow color. The blue on its own is too blue and the brown is too brown. Go figure. Mix them, they seem to make a nice kind of grayish color. There's no reason you couldn't use a gray or some kind of grayish, like gray beige kind of colored pencil too. That would be, or I should say watercolor pencil. That would be a totally fine option. But I'm mixing colors here. So I've always got my paper towel here that I use for dabbing off my brush as I wet things, because with watercolor pencils, you don't want to be too wet. So I've got my water over here and I'm wetting the candy cane, just the white part of the candy cane first. And then I'm going to come in and get like, just kind of grab onto that shadow color a little bit and then let it kind of bleed in. And if I've got too much of that color, there's no reason I can't lift a little bit out, but I want to get that shadow to be where the shadow is, but just softer. And then I'm going to come over here and do the same thing, putting my water in the white section and then over to the shadow. And then I'll blend this shadow in. So really I'm letting the shadows blend into the lights and I'm getting like a soft wet on wet effect. But you can see those shadows are starting to kind of get a little bit of dimension. Yeah, it's a little bit goofy under there, but don't worry. I don't think it's going to be too noticeable with the bow. And then just get my water in my white section, or just the part I don't want to really have color, and then just blend that shadow in ever so slightly. Okay, I think I'm happy with our shadows, and I'm going to go ahead and let that dry, and then we're going to come in and do the fun part of the candy cane. My candy canes have dried, and I'm just pushing that shadow a little further. I could choose to wet that again, but then I'd have to let it dry again, so I think I'm just going to let that indigo blue kind of just remain dry for now, and I'm going to go ahead and start the stripes on our candy cane. And I'm doing that with basically just adding a line, but I'm slightly curving it ever so slightly, and the curves will get more intense as I come kind of closer to the kind of the curve of the candy cane here. And you're going to be putting that red right on top of your shadow color. And then I'm going to come over here and do the same thing, but I'm going to kind of go in the opposite direction with this one. And I'm just going to kind of take a little skip here. I'm not actually worrying about where things line up under there. Might kind of take a guess here. I'm not being super precise. I'll just put one more stripe and then we'll call that good. And since I've got the red, why don't I just go ahead and just color the bow quick. I'm gonna lighten it a little bit with my kneadable eraser just so that the pencil lines are not quite as bold. And then just come in here. And you know what, I might go lighter in some spots just to kind of give the impression of this being a little bit shiny. Actually, I'm going to make more shine. I think I want the shine to kind of be on the part that kind of bumps up. So I'm just going to lift that up a little bit with my eraser, just dabbing it, and it kind of picks up a bit of the pigment. Do the same thing over here, and I'm going to grab a darker red as well to kind of create a bit of shadow in this ribbon here. Otherwise, I'm just kind of coloring it in. Leave a little spot for a highlight there. Fill this in. I might leave a little spot for the highlight on the center of the bow, like so. Again, if the highlight's optional. I'm going to fill this little section in with the red. I'm going to go really dark, but I'm also going to end up coming in here with kind of a purpley color to make that more of a shadow. Again, I'm going to leave a highlight kind of just within this area here where the light might be hitting it. That is totally optional, but I'm just going to do that because it adds just a little touch of realism to this fun little candy cane duo here. And then I'm coming in with my red purple. This is red violet. And I'm going to do that shadow in here. Actually might even throw a tiny, tiny bit of our indigo back in there too, because that indigo will help push the shadow a bit darker than what I'm able to achieve with just that red violet color. Just push that a little tiny bit. And then I'll use the red violet for the rest of the shadows because I don't want them to be quite as dark. So I'll put a little bit of shadow here, a little bit here. Again, I'm thinking most of the shadows kind of are on the left of this. And we'll put a little bit under here, a little bit under here, and then maybe down here on the ribbon. I'm kind of feeling like I could have even had a little bit more of my shadow color on my candy canes than what I've got. So you know what I might do? It's a little bit more risky to kind of come in here and just add this very softly, but I'm going to use this. I probably won't wet it at this point. I'm just going to use a very, 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 very fine, I guess you could say very gentle form of shading here so that it doesn't look like it's been colored in here, just so that I get a little bit more shadow on this side of the candy cane. I would just say you can blend it if you want, but now that the red is on here, that's a bit risky to do. So I don't think I'm going to necessarily blend it with the water. If I do blend it with the water, I'll have to be really careful. I'll see if I can. I'll show you what it looks like if I try, but watch me first and see if it actually works. Because if it picks up the red, we're going to get weird stuff happening. So let's just see if it will work or not. I have to do each little shape, and so that's where I'm not so sure if it's a good idea. It can be done. I think if I was you, unless you want a little challenge, I think I would probably just let that stay dry, that shadow, because adding the water is definitely just more challenging to go into all the little shapes, I'll put it that way. I'll just keep doing it on this candy cane since I started this one, and I would just say do it with care if you decide to re-wet. I'm kind of pretty dry. My brush is pretty dry. I'm going to have to blend this out because I'm getting a little bit of hard edge here. You can see I keep wiping my brush off as I'm doing this because I do not want to drag too much of that color around. So I'm going to let that dry, and then I will come in and add the rest of the colors. All right, these candy canes are dry, and I actually really like it even just with the red and white, but you know, what's a good candy cane without the green? So I'm throwing green in as well. So I'm going to throw a little green stripe in just below each of the red stripes. You can leave a little white gap if you want. I think that's what I'm going to do, just a very, very small little white gap. And then I'll just fill this in. You definitely want a nice sharp pencil for this because these little lines are so small. I'll just speed it up as I do these. All right, so I guess we can go ahead and wet this now. So I'm going to do all the little red sections, and then I'll come and do all the little green sections just so they don't mush together. All right, while I'm going with the red, I'm going to go ahead and do the little bow, and then I'll come back and do the green after. So if you want to wet it all where the highlight is, you may have to lift a bit of color, but I'm just going to wet that light shape first, or I should say the white section, and then just drag away from it into the darks. Do the same thing on the other side. So again, I keep washing my brush now because I want to maintain these lights. So I want a fairly clean brush when I first start wetting where the highlight is, and then it doesn't matter as much as I come away from it where I go into the dark sections, but every time I come to a highlight, I want to have a clean brush and then go into the darker sections. And do the same thing here, so light and then work into my darks. And then into the darks down here. Just try and soften that. It's a little bit challenging to just get the bow just so, but you can definitely do it. Just make sure you wet the lights, come into the darks, and then leave it alone. And then you can come to the darks up here while things are still wet. And then finally, I'm going to come into these tiny little folds, the inside of the bow, I guess you could say. All right. I think I'm happy with that. The bow is looking a bit pink. If you want to, you could drop a little bit more color. I might do that. Let's just grab my pencil. This is the easiest way to do it. If you do this while it's still wet, you can get away with adding more color in some spots. Maybe I don't even want to leave the highlights as strong if they are looking too pink. You can always just come in and try and fill in some of the other areas. I'm going to try and leave my highlights still, and if I really don't like them, I can fill them in after, but I prefer to leave my highlights light if I can. But everything's just, to me, looking almost too pink. Probably because I maybe added a little more water, or I just didn't have enough of the watercolor pencil to start with. So this is an easy way to just throw more pigment in. Otherwise, you would want to just wait for everything to fully dry, and then you could color it again and add another layer of color and then wet that layer, or leave that layer dry at that point. But this is what I'm going to do for this one. Again, I'm being a little persnickety on this bow. You don't have to be so persnickety. You do not need to leave highlights. Why don't we just kind of wash them down a little bit? And honestly, the highlights don't make or break the bow, so they almost maybe look dumb, do they? I don't know. We'll fill it up a bit. Yeah, that's better. I like the highlights on the top of the bow. I don't like them as much on the ribbon. So, all right, so I might let this just dry for a quick minute before I come and do the greens, and then we will be finished that one. Okay, I let that dry a little, and I'm going to just quickly wet the greens, and then I'll be done. All right, let's do our snowman. Now for this snowman, we could pencil it in first if you want to, or we could come straight in with our watercolor pencil, but I think I'm gonna just give myself maybe a little bit of grace and just go in with the pencil really lightly and do the 3 main balls for our snowman. Some of this we can probably just add in details with our watercolor pencils, but like I say, using pencil first does give you a little bit more grace. And I'll just put a little bit of snow around him, kind of like this. And we will kind of add more of the effective snow when we get our color on here. And add some eyes and a nose, make it a little bit rough, rustic looking. Do these little dots for a mouth, although you could definitely do whatever you would like for your mouth. And do we want to do a top hat, or do we want to do like a snow hat? I'm going to go ahead and make him like a little more like a snow hat, but if you want to make it like a top hat, you can definitely do that too. So this is going to be the base where it's kind of folded, knit. Make it kind of wrap around his head a little bit, and then I'll come up here and do this part. Give him a little pom-pom on the top, make it a little bit like that, and then let's give him a scarf. I'm actually going to go about here is where I'm going to put the knot. And then we'll make the scarf come down. Be like that. I don't know. Maybe put a few little tassels on it. And I'm just going to make it like stripes. And we got to give him some little arms. He's kind of turned a little bit, so we're going to see this part of the branch. We won't see that side. And maybe a couple buttons. I think I'm going to make this hat come down just a little bit. It seems like it's kind of just a bit, I don't know. Looks like it doesn't fit him almost. Looks like it's a little bit too small. That's what it looks like. I'm just gonna increase the size of it a little bit like that. That looks better. I think I like that. I'm just gonna lighten things off just a smidgen before I add my watercolor pencil. And I'm actually going to use the indigo blue again for my shading, just because it's a nice kind of neutral blue. It's not as intense. But you could use any blue or even a grayish color for the shadows, but I'm just going to go ahead and just very lightly in a circular motion kind of create this C-shaped shadow around the side of his face and then his body. And then do the same thing here. I'm going to maybe make a little bit more shadow right where the balls are kind of meeting, because they're going to cast a little bit of a shadow there. And then just fill this in. Again, I'm just kind of using a circular motion, partly because that's going to help add to the texture of this kind of being a snowball, right? And I'm also wanting to be fairly smooth because I don't want to have like a lot of hatching texture or anything. I'm just going to put a little bit of shadow under his hat. Again, because the light, I'm just making the light source always come from the right just to be consistent, which means the shadow is on the left. I'll grab my orange to do the carrot, and then I'll kind of tone it down a little bit because this orange is really bright. I'll just put a little bit of this India red on the carrot nose as well, especially along the bottom edge of it so that it looks like it's in the shadow. And then I'm going to come in here, and I don't usually use black I just don't, but I'm using a little bit of black for these little eyes and mouth, but we could, you know, maybe make a blend, put a little bit of this India red on top of the black, just so that it's not quite as ugly a black. And then I'm going to go ahead and use the brown for the stick arms. Usually when I work in like watercolor or most mediums, like I kind of tend to mix up a color that's kind of a little bit more of a colorful brown or black. But I think for today, I'm just going to keep it simple and use the brown. And then I'm just going to put some of this on the snow to create a little bit of shadow under him. This is optional. If you, depending where you're putting your snowman, you might not even want shadow underneath of him. I think it adds a nice touch, but it's not necessary. You could even have a little bit of ground further back if you want to. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put a tiny bit of the blue, just almost like as an outline. This is my indigo still. And just kind of outline this right side, because sometimes with a round object, as the object kind of recedes, as it moves away from you, like so, it can get a little bit of shadow, even though this is on the right side, where it is getting more light, so we don't want too much shadow there. Then once again, I'm going to pick up my red, and I'm going to use red for his hat. I might even use red and green stripes. Maybe that top pom-pom, I wonder, maybe we should leave it white. Would that be cute? Maybe we'll do that. And then I'll do the stripes. You could actually do green and white stripes. I was going to do green and red, but honestly, it would actually look kind of cute if you did green or blue, something else than just the red here. But anyways, I'm using red, and I'm thinking I'm going to use green as well. And I made that shape right there where the knot is a little bit rounded. I'll wait and do the tassels in green. And I'm going to kind of reverse where my stripe is over here, or I should say kind of alternate where the stripe is. Let's use our bright Christmas green. I know I'm kind of giving him a candy cane scarf here. And with watercolor pencils, you don't have to have every single little nook and cranny filled, because you're going to blend. Anyways, I'm just going to put these little tassels. I'm going to make them green. I don't know, do I do the same thing with his hat that I did on his scarf? It's definitely going to be a Christmas snowman. And then I'm going to grab some colors for the shadow. So in this case, anywhere I'm shading, anywhere that there's red, I'll shade it with kind of the purpley color. And maybe even just a bit deeper red. I'll just use the same red and just push a little harder to create some shadows. And I'll do that at the base of the hat. So all down here, it's going to be a little darker than at the top, and more so on the left. Now this is the reddish purple. Again, I'm just pushing these shadows, so I'm making it a little bit extra, but it's not, you don't have to push these shadows as much. You can kind of see though how as I'm doing this, it's giving it a little bit more dimension, especially where I'm putting this part of the scarf behind the other. And then for greens, I'm using the darker green from Faber Castel, and I'm going to just, again, push my shadows just a little bit more along the bottom here. And you can see how pushing those shadows, really just always on the left is the way I'm going, because I've got my light source on our right. You can see how that's kind of just added just a little extra touch and push things just that little bit. All right, let's go ahead and add some water to this snowman. So I'm going to start in the light areas first, so the white or clear sections, and I'm just applying water, and then I'm going to work my way into the shadows. So just like so, and I'm kind of like jiggling my brush a bit as I do this blending, because I want to kind of maintain kind of that bumpy effect of the snow. And then I'll go over here, do the same thing, just kind of blend that tiny bit of shadow that we created at that edge, and just add a bit of water, just get it just blended enough. You know what, I'm not going to worry about those buttons too much. I'm going to let them get kind of blended out for now. Oh, I didn't even add any pigment to them yet, so that's fine. We'll add them after. And just go over here. Try not get the branch to blend in too much. Just wet that a smidgen. Okay, now the face. You know what? I'm not going to wet too much around his features because they will kind of mush in. So I'll just kind of come in here and then get this part blending. And blending a little bit of the hat color in. That's okay because I don't mind a little bit of watercolor. You know, watercolor does sometimes blend one shape to the next, and that can be a really pretty look if that's what you're after. As long as you're okay with the blending that happens where, say, the little bit of green is leaking into the snow, that's fine. I don't mind that. I'm going to leave the nose for now and just make sure I don't have any like too weird dry spaces in here that get hard edges. I'm just kind of watching that there because I try not to over wet these little features. And now I will jump into maybe the top of his hat. I don't want to do this part right here while this face is wet, so I'll just go into the red part. And I'll start with the lighter parts, and then I'll work my way into the darker side. And once again, made a little splash there. Splash. Is that a splash and a splotch together? Anyways, I'll do this little pom-pom. I think if I'm careful, we'll be okay. I kind of mushed a little bit of red in there. Let's just dab it off a smidge. All right, and then we could go do the snow, and then I'll come back and add all the final details to the scarf. Okay, once again, I'm coming in with my water in the clear areas, then I'm dragging the darks in. Do the same thing here. Let's go add water down here and blend that around. Oh, I'm really wet there, which is fine. I'm kind of still shaking my brush around a little bit as I blend this, but I'm just going to soak up some of the water down here because it's kind of running. And then I'll just once again go back into, as you can see, I keep dabbing my brush off so that I don't drag too much paint in places I'm not wanting it. Or I should say pigment, right, from the pencil here. I want to maintain my lights. I think that's okay, like so. Okay, I'm gonna let it dry, and then when it's dry, I will come back in and add the water to the scarf and to the striped part of the hat. Do you enjoy working in watercolor pencil? If so, I think you'll be interested in my free 2-part pencil technique mini workshop. Whether you're looking for ways to add texture to your work, or if you simply enjoy coloring and would like to add dimension to your coloring pages, this workshop is for you. You can even apply many of these techniques to graphite pencil or other dry media. I'll share examples of how I apply these techniques to inspire you with ideas for your own artwork. You can sign up for this workshop at the link in the description below. Now back to today's video. So our little snowman is dry enough that we can come in and do the rest of the hat and the scarf. So I'm just gonna, again, this is kind of optional, but I'm still going to go ahead and start in my lighter areas and work into the darks. And yes, I didn't wash my brush between. If I start to feel like I'm getting too red, like I am now, I'll wash my brush and quickly dry it and then come back in. So I'm gonna do all the little red sections, and then I'll come and do all the little green sections just so they don't mush together. Unless you like that look, then you can absolutely do them at the same time. Okay, I haven't let anything dry yet, but I think I'm just gonna go ahead and try the green and see how this goes. And if it starts to bleed more than I'd like it to, then I will wait for the red to dry a bit more. But I think I can maybe get away with this if I don't. My red wasn't super wet. We'll see. You can see it's not really bleeding too much, is it? The colors are more or less staying put. I'm working fairly dry, but wet enough that I get the blended look. All right, let's go down here. Ooh, that one's almost gonna bleed together because I'm wetter right there. Again, I'm always, as I do each shape, starting at the lighter sections and working into my dark sections. You don't have to do that with these tiny little shapes. It just kind of keeps the effect, or I should say the depth that we created, where it looks lighter at the top, darker at the bottom, to give the impression of a little bit of a shadow. But if you just go ahead and wet it, it's not going to be the end of the world. But if you want to maintain your shadows, start in your lights, go to your darks, and then at least dab your brush between each one. And then when you get really a lot of pigment, I should say, on your brush, wash your brush. and then dry your brush. If you have a little pigment, you can just dry your brush. You can see a tiny bit of bleeding there, but that's okay. All right, I really like that. That's cute. Now let's just quickly do, we wouldn't even have to do the branches, but let's just do that quick. Wet them really quickly and be careful there, and then find a position that works. All right, now his features. I'm just gonna go ahead and put a little drop of water on his eyes and these little dots, so it'll just make them a little more vibrant. Again, this is optional because with watercolor pencil, you can leave it dry if you find that it's a bit much to blend everything. I would really focus, the parts that I would focus on really making sure you're happy with the blending is really like the snow, right? Because that's where we get the watercolor look, whereas these little tiny shapes, you can so get away with just kind of leaving them dry if you wanted to. Oh, I like how vibrant the orange gets though when I wet it. Okay, I'm gonna grab my black pencil quickly again. Oh yeah, I used black and a little bit of brown, didn't I, for the blacks. So I think, was this the one I used? I think I mixed a little bit of this into my black to make it more colorful. Let's see how that looks. Here's our little snowman. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and do our cute little mug now, and I'm just going to draw myself an access line here. That's gonna help me stay straight. I'm going very light because I'm planning to erase that. Then I'm gonna draw an ellipse for the top and the bottom of this mug. If you would like to learn more about drawing mugs or cylinders in general, I have a video that covers that in more detail, so I'll include a link for that in the description below. But today we're gonna keep this mug nice and simple. I'm gonna draw some lines to connect those, and then I'm gonna draw myself a little handle. And I might even make at the top of this mug a slightly kind of wider opening. Like I say, I want it fairly simple, but I'm gonna just kind of draw a line where I'm gonna make a little bit of a white edge or lip to this mug. And I'm gonna extend it just a teeny weeny little bit wider than the rest of the mug. So just do that. And you'll see it kind of come together when I go to actually paint it. And then I will do the inside here. This is where the hot chocolate line is going to be. Okay, let's get rid of all the things we don't need, as in this access line here. And the back of the bottom ellipse, we don't need it anymore. And then I'm going to draw in these little marshmallows. So I'm just going to do them kind of like this, but some of them I might actually turn into like little cylinders as well. I'm not going to do it to all of them because, again, marshmallows aren't a very strong structure to them. Yes, they're cylindrical, but they're also really mushy, right? And they're just kind of puffy. So I'm not going to be too precise with how I'm drawing these little things. And should we make them a little more piled high on here? Depends who you are, right? Some people really like their marshmallows. And even if you don't really like marshmallows, you have to admit they're pretty cute. All right, I'm gonna just kind of dab this off a little bit with my kneaded eraser because I don't want it to be too, should we say too much pencil here. We want these to be very faint. I'll just dab off a few other spots with the kneadable eraser just so that I get just very faint lines here. And then I'm gonna grab these two colors that I've used before for my shadow, and I'm gonna quickly outline these little marshmallows just with very light pressure. And I'm not gonna make a big deal of those little ellipses that are kind of forming the little bit of the cylinder shape the marshmallow has. I'll just put them in a few spots, but don't want to overdo. Put a little bit of shadow kind of towards the left of these little marshmallows. Again, very, very light pressure because, as you know, this is a deep blue. I'm going to put a little bit of this India red on as well, just to kind of give them a little bit of a neutral color. There's no reason you couldn't use a light gray for this rather than having to blend colors. I like blending colors, but really keep it simple and just use a light gray. You'll be fine. Or if you have like kind of a beigey gray, we call that grayish. Anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and just, since I've got still that little line for myself where the hot chocolate was gonna be, I'm gonna just fill this little tiny space that remains for my hot chocolate with a little bit of that chocolate, just so I don't lose that look. And I'm actually blending a couple of browns together because I think the India red will be too red. So I'm just gonna blend browns, but if you have the perfect brown, just use one color. Then I'm gonna outline the rest of this mug. And as I said, this top little section here is gonna end up white at the end. So I'm gonna leave it be while I do this. Give myself my outline. And I think I'm gonna fill in the inside of the mug with the red as well. We're just gonna say that white outline is on the outside of the mug. So I'm just gonna fill this in. So I'm gonna start coloring, and I'm just gonna speed the video up as I do this because coloring is pretty mindless. If you wanna add any designs to your red mug, you absolutely can. I'm just gonna keep things simple and just fill it in with red. Actually, you know what I wish I would have done? I wish I would have left a highlight here. That was kind of not smart of me. I'm going to erase a little bit of the pigment, and then I can kind of lift it a little bit as I wet it. So, my bad. But it's going to be okay because I don't need a bright highlight. And then I'm going to come in and add my shadows. So I'm going to go in here and put some deeper shadows underneath this section here. A little bit under here. And I'm still using the same red, and then I'm going to add some deeper colors in a minute here. Just a very small amount the right side of the mug. Put a little bit under this white lip, and then on this side of the mug. The way the shadows work is they kind of almost do the opposite because of the way the sun is coming. This is kind of blocking light over here. And quite honestly, these marshmallows are probably casting some shadows on the mug as well. Again, my mug series goes into a lot more depth on cylinders as well as shading cylinders. Putting that deep dark red in some of my shadows just to make them a little bit darker. And if you really want to push your shadows, you can even put a little bit of indigo, this deep dark blue, into your shadow side. I'll do that in a few spots just to push it. Why not? And then I want to use a very light whisper of it on this shadow side of the white section, right? Because we want the white to still have a shadow. And I'll mix that same India red on top of it, hopefully to get a kind of a neutral grayish color. So now when I add water, I'm going to start right here in this light section, but I'm going to be lifting a little bit of it out because, like I say, I should have left a little bit of a highlight and I didn't. So I'm just kind of lifting it, and then I'll go into my darks. I can always accentuate my darks a little bit more. I feel like this red could be a little bit darker actually. So I'm just filling in the light sections first. And like I say, I'm going to work on making sure I kind of pick that highlight out a little bit with a little bit of lifting techniques here. Just going to work around it and then come into my deep red. As we'll get the shadow wet while I'm at it. I might have to add another layer. We'll see. I'm going to wash my brush because I'm definitely dragging some of that color out. Yeah, I'm happy with mostly how much of the highlight I've lifted. Definitely, I need more red. So I'm just going to grab my red pencil. I actually might even grab a couple of these red pencils. This one's got a little bit more of an orange undertone to it. Might drop some of this into the lighter side. And then I'll drop more of my pinky red in too. But I feel like that Christmassy red, when it's watered down, it almost does look pink. So I'm just going to really throw in more of this orangey red, just lifting it right off my pencil, dropping it in to the light side of my mug, and then I will come back in with some of my cooler red, which is a little bit more of the pinky color, and put it in a few spots if I need it. I might not even need it, you know that. This red actually is kind of giving me the effect I'm after. Coming back into my shadows. Just try and get that shadow to kind of blend into the rest of my mug. It still is a little bit anemic looking, like a touch bit on the pinky side. I might always come in here after, but I just want to get this smooth for this layer. We can decide if we want to deepen those colors. I'm just going to come in here and again start with the lighter area, but you know what, this, I really do like this red mixed in this one. This one is by Faber Castel and it's Pale Germanium Lake. But any kind of reddish orange works, like poppy red or whatever. Obviously my Christmas red was just a bit too pink, or I just needed more of it, but I kind of like the combination of reds here, so that's what I'm using. And then yes, working into my shadows. Ooh, slopping a little bit. And then I'll try not to dip my hand in here and just come in and wet these reds up here, and then I'll let it dry before I do my marshmallows and my white sections. I'm gonna let that dry. All right, so now that that's dry, I'm gonna come in and do my whites. So I'm gonna have a slightly smaller paintbrush for this, and I'm just gonna come in and I'm probably gonna do one marshmallow, then skip a little space and kind of do that around just so that I don't like mush them all together into one mass. Put a little bit more shadow on this one, kind of down there. There we go. Let's go do this one. Ooh, that was wild. Sorry about that. I wanted to neutralize that one a tiny bit, but that was a little bit overboard. Okay, let's go over here. Well, maybe this one. Yeah, we'll try doing the ones that are touching the wet one. We'll see how it goes. Just try and make sure I don't get too wet. I think it's actually working out okay. All right, I'm just gonna go ahead and wet this. So again, lightest first, into the darks. Went out of the line a little bit. I think we'll be okay here. I'll just have to fix things a little bit. Things are bleeding a little bit, so I'm just trying to clean it up a bit with my brush. So I use a clean, damp brush, kind of wipe over that area, kind of pick up the mass, and then wipe it on my paper towel. And then I'm gonna let that dry, and I'll come in and just kind of tweak the areas that still need a little tweaking, because I want to get the brown wet still, and I just want to just kind of add a few final touches and just fix anything that's a little bit messy. So I'm gonna let that dry one more time, and then I will come and do the final details. Actually, before I let it dry, I could work on the shadow. Let's do that. Just give it a little bit of a shadow. Maybe we will even just color it on there with our indigo blue. And a tiny, tiny touch of one of our browns. Let's just do something simple like this. Deepen the shadow a bit right under the mug itself. And then put a little bit more towards the left. It's good enough. And then I'm going to come and start by wetting the area around my shadow first. So I'm just going to do that quickly. And then I'm going to kind of start into the shadow. That way it can just gently and softly blend into the wet section. Just clean that up because it's almost running just a bit more than I need it to. Come in and tweak things after if I need to, but I'm going to let that dry and then I'll be back. Okay, I'm just coming in here quick. I put a little bit of some of my shadow colors in here again, and I just blended those out to kind of get my shadow working. Didn't have my camera on there for a few seconds, so sorry. I just tweaked my shadow a little bit, and then I'm coming in and just wetting this hot chocolate back here. I'm just using the tip of my brush, and my brown is looking a little bit, I don't know, maybe a little bit too red. So I might just grab a little bit of my dark brown right off my pencil and just drop a little bit in just to kind of make sure this does still look like hot chocolate. And there's our cute little mug. If you've enjoyed today's video, you might enjoy my watercolor pencil playlist. I've got summer, fall, winter, and Christmas tutorials on there, and there's more to come. In the meantime, I hope this tutorial has brought a little taste of God's beauty and peace into your everyday life, that this will enhance your Christmas celebration, and that it's inspired you to continue enjoying your own creative journey. See you again soon. Bye!